All right. It's probably gonna be a short stream. Gonna do some React testing. Let's just make sure we get everything set up real quick. Testing library. Okay, we got this. Oh wait, I gotta fix my sound. Hold on. Okay, there we go. That should be better. Okay, yeah, I had speakers on for a second. Wow, I've been talking the entire time. I've been talking for the past. I've been talking for the past what? How long has it? I've been talking for like the past 5 minutes, and I had not noticed that I have been that I've been on mute. That is really embarrassing. Wow. Okay, well, we're gonna have to start all over again. If this was a video, I would have to stop the recording and then re-record everything. But that's okay. That is an epic fail. But don't worry. So what I said. So I did see your message. Your name looks very familiar, but I think were you? I think were you that guy from the Netherlands or something? I think I remember you. Okay, let me go ahead and wow, I can't believe I didn't. Yeah, thanks for letting me know about my mic. I would have honestly never realized it until now. I thought it was unmuted the entire time. Okay, we're gonna. Okay, but it's fine because I actually kind of messed up a little bit. Thankfully, it was muted, so that way I can actually re-explain everything that I just explained because in my head it didn't really sound so clear. Anyways, I'll probably have to leave a note telling people to skip to, let's see, skip to a certain time. I think it's been 7 minutes, 8 minutes. Okay, yeah. Anyways, so for those who are watching, basically what we're going to do in this live stream is we're going to basically build out a very simple React app. It's going to have simple functionality, and the whole point is are going to we are going to build out a simple application, and we're going to write test cases for it. And we're going to use React Testing Library to test our application. React Testing Library is actually a very awesome testing library. A lot of people who have written tests for React have probably used things like Enzyme, Cypress. And React Testing Library itself, there's a lot of nice things about it, and it's actually like the author that created React Testing Library had this vision where they wanted engineers, they want developers to test their application as if they were actually using it as an end user. So instead of worrying about state and instead of worrying about implementation details, you're testing it based on how the user would actually use the application. 2-3 years ago and something even before coding. I remember you. Yeah, I remember you. It's been like over a year since I saw you. Actually, there's a lot of people that I haven't really seen that used to be on the server, but everyone moved on already, so it's fine. Anyways, going back to React Testing Library. So what's nice about React Testing Library is instead of having to worry about the state, instead of having to worry about testing your hooks, like use state, use context, instead of having to worry about all of that, which sometimes it can be pretty painful to test things like use state or use effect, instead of worrying about that, React Testing Library aims to allow the engineer developer to write test cases that make it seem like you're using the application. Like, for example, if you're going to an application as a user, you're going to do things such as, oh, let me look for the search box. Okay, I found a search box. Let me click on it. Okay, let me type some stuff. And with React Testing Library, it provides tools for you to do such and such things, literally as if you were using the application. It provides tools for you to find the text box, and you can find it based on certain things such as the display value. Like if you have an input field, it allows you to find it based on the display value. So search, you can find it based on the role. So things like text box. There's a lot of documentation. We'll go through all of it. I don't remember every single thing off the top of my head, but let me actually, since I already have the API already opened up, let me go ahead and explain a little bit more what I really am referring to. So let's say, for example, if we wanted to find a certain element on the screen, React Testing Library provides many different queries. Okay, so if you look over here in the documentation, they have different queries, and let me see if I can actually find the ones that you're going to be using more that you're going to be using often. Let's see, somewhere here. I'm still fairly new to React Testing Library, so see, where was it? Cheat sheet is it over here? I want to make sure I find the. Okay, there we go. Queries. Okay, so we have what's called queries. Okay, and pretty much queries allow you to search for elements, search for nodes on the document, and it allows you to search it in a way that it makes it feel like you're an actual user that's just looking at the application. You don't know what the implementation is. You're just looking at the application, and you want to search it based off of things that you can actually see and visualize. So, for example, if we look at some of these queries, let's look at label text. Okay, so you'll notice that there are different types of queries. There's get by, there's find by, query by, get all by. Hopefully, we'll be able to cover most of these, but we might not cover all of them in this live stream. But we'll cover the ones that you'll definitely need to use. So, and there's also a nice questionnaire that tells you which one you should be using. But let's go through some that you will be using often. So, for example, you have by label text. So, if you're familiar with HTML inputs, you should know what labels are. They pretty much allow you to display the actual label, like an actual like string on the document that represents which input field you're writing changes for. So, for example, if you have a username field, the label serves as the purpose to let the user know that this box that you're typing stuff in is going to be used for a username. Likewise, for a password field, you will have a label that might say something like password. Okay, and like I said, as we actually get into the code, like all this will make sense. So, if let's say, for example, you wanted to find a input field and you wanted to test that input field and you want to make some changes, well, first you need to find that input field. And there's many ways you can do it. One way that you can do it is by finding it by the label text. And depending on the situation, you'll either have to use one of these 6 queries, so either get by, query by, find by, etc., etc. And like I said, we'll go through this FAQ to determine which one's best for us. Okay, you can also search for text box or input fields based off the placeholder text. So if, again, like I said, if you're familiar with input fields have an attribute called placeholder, and you can set a placeholder in that input field so it shows the user, hey, listen, this is just placeholder text that you can see. Once you start typing stuff in this input field, that placeholder text is gone. But like I said, from the perspective of a user, the user will look at these things. They'll look at the placeholder and they'll think to themselves, well, I see this placeholder. It shows an example of a first name, of a username, of an email address. Let me go ahead and enter the appropriate details for that input field. So that's the whole ideology behind React Testing Library. Okay, and there's other things too, such as finding by text. You can find by display value. So that's the current value of the input field. You can find by alt text, which is alternative text. I think that's what it stands for, I'm pretty sure. And that's for things like image alt attributes. It's best for, there's obviously other HTML elements that you could probably provide the alt attribute as well. There's also title. There's also by role. And there's also by test ID. So these are IDs that you can manually set. It's kind of just like, regular HTML ID, but instead it's a data test ID attribute. And you can set it to make finding your elements a lot easier. I personally don't like using this method because it just adds an extra attribute. But if you really need to, you definitely can do it. I feel like it's a cheap way, but don't quote me on that though, because again, I'm still fairly new to this library, but I'm just trying my best to explain as well as learn further my understanding of this library. But hopefully my explanation serves good purpose. Anyways, so hopefully that short, brief introduction of these queries makes sense. We can use these queries to search for certain things on the document. You can search for buttons, you can search for input fields, you can search for paragraphs, header tags, anything, and we will see plenty of examples as we write our code. Okay, so now that we have queries, a couple other things too that you'll be using is such as firing events. So when it comes to JavaScript is very well known for event-driven programming. Oh, that was my chair squeaking. Sorry about that. JavaScript, Node.js, these environments, they're really known for event-driven programming. JavaScript in the browser, a lot of things that you do on the DOM based on events. Like using these events allow you to actually develop your application, provide more functionality. What's up, Frosted Death? How are you? Same thing with Node.js. In Node.js, you have event emitters, right? And you can emit events manually. And so whenever someone types something, you can emit an event, and then you can consume that event, and you can perform some kind of action. So when it comes to event-driven programming, events are very important, and thus it's also very important that we're testing our code based on events. Some might say that this is, event-driven testing. You can call it really. There's a lot of names out there. There's many different types of testing methodologies. I think the one that best suits this video, the one that we're going about, is behavioral-driven testing, which I believe is really the philosophy of React Testing Library. At least that's what the impression I got from the author of this library, Ken C. Dodds. At least that's what I got from the introduction. Okay, but yeah. So you have fire events, and again, these things pretty much allow you to trigger events. So you can literally fire any event. You can fire events such as a button click, focus, like whenever you focus on a text box. You can fire events that have to do with changing input. Literally any event that you can think about. Okay, you can deal with that. And when you fire these events, they might perform some kind of asynchronous operation. So let's say, for example, again, if we have a form, you might want to trigger a click event on the button, so that way it will call your API, or maybe not necessarily call your API if we're just doing unit testing. But if you're doing end-to-end testing, then yes, you'll need to have it calling your API. But let's say if we're just unit testing and we want to make sure that we are that this button will do exactly what we need to do and call our API or call these certain methods, that is where we can fire an event and we can assert to see if these functions are called. And like I said, when we look at examples, it'll make so much more sense. But I think honestly we've pretty much talked a lot about the basis of React Testing Library. I feel like there's a lot of things more, and I don't want to really overwhelm people. And I kind of just want to get straight into the testing, because I think it's pretty fun when you actually understand how testing works and how you can use this library to test your code. I feel like it's an extra mandatory skill that every developer should aspire to have. Not everyone necessarily needs to test their code in what I mean by that is, because what I mean by that, for context, what I'm saying is that usually in like more like team-based environments, they'll usually have a separate person to test the code, because a rule of thumb is the person who wrote the code should never write the test for that, because they'll have a bias when they're writing their test cases, because they know how the feature works, they know how that works, so they'll develop a bias. So that's a rule of thumb. That's what I mean by necessarily you might not always need to know testing, because you'll probably have, sometimes you might have a different QA team, a different team that's dedicated for testing to write tests for you. But I think as a personal skill, it's definitely a good skill to have. A lot of companies definitely want their engineers to know how to write test cases. They want their engineers to know how to write unit tests, write integration tests, write functional tests, all types of tests. And you're going to get asked this question, well, you can code all of these features, but how do you test these things? And if you tell them that you manually test your code by, entering stuff manually, they're not really going to be super satisfied. They're going to, the thing that they want to hear usually is, oh, well, I use a framework like Jest. I use a framework like React Testing Library. I use a framework like Enzyme. I use a framework like Cypress, etc. Anyway, so I think this was a long enough introduction. Let's go straight into building out our simple application, and we're going to write some test cases. So we're going to go ahead and go into our terminal. We're going to use create React app to scaffold a quick project, and I'll just do React testing demo. And we're going to use TypeScript. Hopefully you guys don't mind. Okay, so while that's generating, it'll take about a couple seconds, so we'll just let that do its thing. And let me see. Shouldn't take too long. All right, so we're going to need a couple of dependencies. When I say couple, I really mean one. which is just which actually we don't even need to install anything else actually, because the nice thing is if you use Create React App, it actually has testing library already integrated, so you don't even need to install it. It's actually already there already, and it's all set up for you. So let's open up our text editor, and let's go into our Visual Studio Code. And for those wondering, for this terminal, this is the Windows terminal. You can download this on the Microsoft Store. And if you're wondering about my theme, I just use the default theme for Visual Studio Code. So let's go into our package.json. So if you look over here on line 6, 7, and 8, you can see that we already have testing library, just DOM, React, and user event. So we have these dependencies already that's part of Create React App. And that goes to tell you that this library is the real deal. Like it's even recommended by React itself. So it's definitely the real deal in my opinion. And I would definitely I would highly recommend using this library. It's amazing. I literally have used this for a couple days, and it was honestly enough time for me to actually really understand how powerful this library is and how nice it is. And you can literally do a lot of things with it. Okay. In terms of setting things up, I think everything else should be set up already. We don't really need to do anything else to set up our tests because we already have this file already called setup tests, and this is going to pretty much set up just DOM and everything for us, so we don't have to worry about that. And we already have a sample test case for our sample app.tsx, and if we want, we can go ahead and just run yarn test. I use yarn. You can use npm if you want, and you should see that what's going on. There we go. Okay, so yeah, it should pass because this is the basic. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just delete this. We're gonna go ahead. We're not gonna delete the app.tsx file. We're just gonna get rid of this. We're gonna get rid of this. Delete the logo. Delete the app.css file. I personally don't use any of these files. I like building out my own stuff. And you can change the name of this app.tsx if you want. You don't have to, but it's fine. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and delete this. And for those who are just joining in, we're getting started on building a simple app, and then we're going to write test cases for it. That's the whole point of this live stream, is to introduce testing with React Testing Library. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just write a simple component. Okay, this component can be literally anything. So off the top of my head, I'm just going to create a folder. I'll call this components. And I'm going to go ahead and let's just see. Let's create a new file. Let's call this, let's see, what exactly do we want to do? I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's just do a simple example. Let's just create a simple header. Okay, let's just create a simple header. It's just going to be it's kind of like a navigation, an app bar, something to display some significant text on the top of our application. So let's go ahead and import React. And we're going to go ahead and just create a variable called header and then export that at the same time. And we likely won't need any props. What's up, John Shala? How are you? Silver Games, how's it going? Size 66p, nice to see that you're still here. Okay, so we're going to create a simple header. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do a simple render. So let's just do header. And let's just do a simple style. I don't have styled components. It's fine. Let's just do a div. Let's just do a div. And let's just do an h1. Let's just call this testing demo app. Testing. Or it'll be called testing app demo. And let's go ahead. And like I said, you don't have to be all, fancy with the styling. It doesn't really matter, right? I'm just being a little bit extra, but you don't have to do this. A space between, and we should probably start our application too. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and go into npm scripts. Let's start our app. So this should run it on port 3000. Okay. So here's our app, and okay. So let's go into our app.tsx file and let's go ahead and import that header like so. You can manually import it, but if you have IntelliSense, or I mean you should have IntelliSense, it usually should auto import it for you if you just type it out. Okay, so let's go ahead and we can see we have our header. Nothing special, like it's just a simple header. Now, what I'm more concerned about is I'm more concerned about writing a test case for this. That's the whole concerning part. So this is where we're going to see the beauty of React Testing Library. So remember what I said earlier in the intro of React Testing Library? The whole point of React Testing Library is to test our application based on behavior, based on what the user, how the user sees the application. So the way I see the application right now is, well, I see a simple header. It doesn't look beautiful, but I can see that it has a header tag over here, a testing app demo, as a hello world. This could be anything, a name, literally anything. There could be a login button, anything. If you want, we can actually change this to be a button. Login. Okay, literally anything. Let me go ahead and align content. I'm pretty OCD, so sometimes I want things to be a little bit, perfect. I'm not sure why that that itself didn't align though. Maybe am I doing something wrong? I don't want to spend too much on styling, but it looks a little bit weird how that button seemed to not want to style. Display flex, justify content space between, align content center. Oh, is it because I don't have a height, maybe? Yeah, that's probably why. Oh no. Oh, isn't that a little bit concerning? That's a little bit weird. Anyways, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm being a little bit OCD. Align items center. Okay, maybe I needed to do align items center. And let's just get rid of this margin. I'm turning this more into a styling course rather than a testing course. I apologize. I just have really bad. Oh wait, hold on. What am I doing? Yeah, let's just go ahead and give it a background color too. Might as well. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was actually working just fine. I was just maybe I was just being. Maybe I just didn't really realize it because there was no background color. That might be why. Okay, let's just make this a little bit pretty. Might as well give you guys a little CSS tutorial while you guys are here. Okay, so we have our header. Awesome. Okay, now let's write a test case for this header. Now, right now, the test case is going to be very simple. So, it's going to be a very, very simple test case. So, because we don't really have much going on with this header. Okay, now, what we're going to do now is, it depends on how you want to structure your code. A lot of people personally, it depends on how you structure. A lot of people personally like to create different folders for each of their components. So, for example, some people like to do this, where they have a header. They have a header for every single component. They create a folder, and then they'll put the actual component file inside that folder. So it looks something like this. So we have a header, form field, something like that. I personally don't do that because I personally don't like that. But if you want to, that you can. But what we're gonna do, the structure that we're going to do is we're gonna go into our source folder and we're gonna create a __ tests folder. And this is where we're going to keep all of our tests. You could put the test inside the components folder, but I personally don't like doing that. But if you follow that structure that I just showed you previously, where you have a folder for every dedicated component file, then you could probably put a test file in there too. I know Angular does that pattern. Okay, and also we're putting the test folder inside here. You can actually put it outside the source folder, but you might need to configure something with Jest so that it actually interprets all the test files inside that folder outside the source. I think if you actually go somewhere in the tsconfig, I'm not entirely sure. That's why I'm doing it inside the source folder. But if any of you guys might know, feel free to let me know. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and write a test case for our header. And you might think, well, what exactly are we really going to test? Like, what exactly are we going to write a test for? Well, first, let's go ahead and just import this header. So import header from components. Okay. And I think that's all we need to import. We don't have any other dependencies. We're going to go ahead and use just globals. So we're pretty much using jest as well as React Testing Library. These things go well and well together. Okay. So pretty much React Testing Library is just a library that helps you test your React app. Just allows you to do the assertions. We also have something called just DOM, which allows you to do like it provides extra utilities to actually test things like, you know, the state of buttons, input fields, etc. So let's go ahead and just write a test suite. So we're going to call this header. This is a convention that I like to follow. You start off with describe. A lot of people just write a simple it or test immediately. You don't have to use describe, but I personally like doing it. So let's just do describe header. So we'll give a name of the component we're testing. And we're really going to just test to see if it renders correctly, and we're going to test to see if it has the correct content. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write a simple test. We're going to use it should have let's see, h1 tag. You can be more descriptive with your test names. So instead of just saying it should have h1 tag, it should have testing app demo text. Okay, so excuse me for a second. Okay, so this is our test right now, and like I said, it doesn't do anything. Okay, so if we were to actually run this test, so we do yarn test, it's just gonna pass. Okay. Okay. Now let's actually get it to do stuff. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and make sure that we can actually we actually make sure that this text is actually inside the header. Okay. Now it's gonna be very simple because this is hard coded in the application, but there's not always a time where your application will actually have text that's hard coded. You might need to fetch it from an API. So this is where we get into searching for text. But let's just do this simple example for now. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and render the component. So we're going to do const. Let's just call this component. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call this component, and let's just go ahead and we're going to import the render function. So this comes from testing library right up top here. And we're going to go ahead and pass in the header tag like this. It's a React element. Okay. And that itself should be fine. Okay. Now, like I said, if we were to run the test again, what did I? Okay. Yeah. So again, it doesn't do anything. All this does is just renders it. Okay. So now that we have rendered it, what we're going to do is we want to actually, well, first let me actually show you what this render result looks like. So this render returns a render result. Okay. Let me show you guys what this actually looks like. So you can see, if we go into the logs, we can see that it says container HTML div element, fiber node. It has a bunch of things such as keys, element type, child, sibling index, memoized, a bunch of things. Okay, but not everything here you'll need to worry too much about. Okay, what we need to worry about now is we need to worry about writing our test case. We need to make sure we're finding this h1 tag. Jacob de Guzman, how's it going? What are you making? We're not really making anything in particular. The whole point of this live stream is I'm just showing people how to write test cases for their application. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to now we're going to search for this h1 tag. So we can actually just simply do const, let's just call this title text, and let's do component, and we can do get by text. Okay, and you can use a matcher, so you can do a regular expression, you can use just a raw string. I'm just going to use a raw string, so testing app demo. Okay, and that itself should be just fine. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do expect. We're going to use an assert. We're going to assert title text to be in the document. So we're going to make sure that when we try to get this by text, we're going to make sure it's in the document. Okay. Now, if this actually wasn't in the document, it would actually throw an error. So if I were to delete that and type testing app demos, you'll see that it will actually fail. So I'm not really too sure. So this is a question that I'll kind of have to save on my own time and figure out. I'm not really sure if it's even meaningful to assert the value, like the result of title text, because it will fail if it can't find it. So if it doesn't fail, it seems like it will find it. It means that you can assume that it will find it. So you can see that it actually is in the document. So expect title text to be in the document. And sometimes you might deal with this. You might deal with sometimes you might have doubts to see if your test actually is actually legit, because sometimes you might get like tests that just pass no matter what, and it could be due to caching issues or some other scoping issue happening. So you can actually negate the value and just do double check, and you can see that if we negate the value, if we say it's not in the document, and this not is part of jest, right? You can see that expected document not to contain element, but it actually found it instead. Okay, so we know that this test is actually working. And if you want to do other things for fun, like other, you can also check the instance of as well, HTML head. I think it's heading element, right? I think a heading element is what h1 tags. Heading element. Let me just double check. Yeah. So an h1 tag is an instance of a. It's an instance of a heading element. Just wanted to double check that. HTML. Let's see. Let me just put something else just to make sure. So if we try to assert it to be an instance of an HTML image element, this should fail. This should fail. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Yeah. Yep. It's an HTML heading element. So you can do this. Just double check to see if the instance of this HTML element is an instance of an HTML heading element. So you can double check just to make sure this is the correct h1 tag. You don't have to do that, but you can if you want to. Okay. So now we're going to write another test, and let's just find the button now. So I'm going to show you guys how to find buttons. So again, for people who aren't really too sure like what the whole goal of this is, right? So right now we are searching in the document to make sure that certain content is in the component, is in the document, right? We are making sure that for our application that this is exactly what the user sees. Okay, so we're searching the document for certain texts to make sure that it's there, and if it's there, that means that our application, that certain component is working or it's rendering appropriately. Okay, but again, it's not as easy as this. Sometimes you might need to write more complicated test cases, and we'll get to that. So right now we're going to write a test case just to find the button, and then we're going to write more components that will have more extensive features. So don't worry, I just thought of a good example to show you guys. But let's go ahead and find this button. So should have login button. Okay, and there are many ways that you can find buttons. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to render our component. You have to make sure you have it rendered in every single test. Okay, and what you want to do is we're going to go ahead and find the button. So const button, and let's go do component. And the way we're going to do this is we can also do get by text as well, or you can also use get by role button. Okay, so if you want, you can use get by text, and it would search for the element, and you can pass in like login. So instead of get by text testing app demo, we would do get by text and then pass in the login string, and it'll find the button for us. And we can actually just do that just to double check. To make sure. Oh, I'm sorry. That should be login. There we go. Okay, there we go. Perfect. And then if we do expect button to be in the documents, it should pass. Okay, so you can use get by text for literally a lot of things. You might not be able to use get by text every single time, but we're gonna use a different query. So we're going to use my goal is to make sure that you guys are aware of the different queries that exist, so you know the difference between each ones. So let me just go ahead and let's see if I can find cheat sheets. FQ by role. Okay. So like I said, so queries for elements with the given role, and it also accepts a text match. So here you can see a table of HTML elements with their default and desired rules. So if you guys want, you guys can actually look up what a role is in an HTML element. Let's see, HTML element roles. To be honest with you, I'm not too familiar with roles itself, but it seems like I think it falls under the whole ARIA role. It seems like. Yep, ARIA attributes. So ARIA is for accessibility for your website. So it allows things like screen readers and stuff. Accessible, rich internet applications. Yep. So you can use. So yeah, that's basically what this is based off of. So you can use. So you can query by roles. Okay, so that means if you look at the list of roles, you can literally query things based off comments, checkboxes, cell roles. So I think this is for tabular data, like for tables, buttons, banners, articles, applications, document, a whole bunch of things. Like there's a whole bunch of options. Okay, so this makes it easier for us. So we can actually just do get by role, and you can pass in button, and there are options too that you can pass in, because you might have more than one button sometimes. So there should be options that you can pass in. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Yeah, so it seems like you can pass in let's see, the name of the button. I think name. Yeah, I think name would be the. I think name would probably be. I'm trying to figure out what name would fall under. Is the name of the button that they gave it? I'd assume so. Okay, we'll have to figure that out at some point. I just wish there was a. Where can I find the actual? Let's see. Options. Configuration options. Nope, I'm trying to find the. Oh, there we go. Normalizer check present name. I just want to double check to see what the name property is. The label of, okay, so it's like, okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so yeah, it would pretty much just be like the label, I guess, the ARIA label of the button. But since we only have one button, or actually it says we can actually do name the name. Okay, there we go. So if I do name login, let's see what happens with this test case. Fails. Let's see. Oh wait, oh wow. Yeah, so it's very strict too. So if you have extra white space, it's going to throw an error. Okay, there we go. Okay, great. So this works. Perfect. So yeah, so if we have multiple buttons, we can filter it out. Yeah, because if I have, let's say if I add another button, login, home, we would want to make sure we could filter out certain buttons. Okay, so if we were to do home, because there's a lot of different buttons. If I actually delete this, you'll see that it'll say that multiple elements are found. Excuse me, I hiccup. Yep, here it says it found multiple elements. Okay, so this allows us to filter it out to a specific button. Great. Okay, so now again, we can do an assertion expect button to be in the document. Okay. And you can do a lot of other things too. So let's go ahead and do something where, let's just do this. Let's see. So we're going to create a new component. So hopefully this makes sense. I know it's very simple, but I really hope it makes a lot of sense. What we did so far was we created a simple component that literally had hard-coded text, and we're testing this component to make sure that the corresponding text that we put is actually in the document. Okay, so we can be sure that this is working appropriately. Now, to be honest with you, right? Let's be honest. Like, so we're probably gonna ask ourselves, well, it's just hard-coded text. Why do we need to test it, right? And the truth is like, yes, you can assume that this will always. You never some of you might assume that no matter what you do with your application, this header component is always going to work. But I feel like that just introduces bad practices, and you want to get into that habit of making sure you're testing everything, because you never know, one little change in your code base could break something. You could break the most unexpected part of your application, and making sure that you test each one of your components and writing not just writing tests, but writing meaningful tests. Making sure and ensuring that you do that allows you to actually be very consistent and prevent you from accidentally writing bugs in your code, because you can and even if your test failed, you can identify what the problem is immediately. So it gives you more insight with your application, and plus it just makes it a lot easier because you don't have to manually test everything. You have automated tests that work just fine for you. Okay. There's one more thing that I'm going to do before we move on. I'm going to go ahead and it should match snapshot. I'm going to go. Oh, excuse me, not snap. I wrote snap shit. I meant snapshot. Sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and just render the component, and we're going to go ahead and just do a snapshot. So we're going to do expect component to match snapshot. And what this will do is it'll create a snapshot, which is pretty much, you can think of the snapshot like it's kind of like a picture of how your component looks like. If you actually look at the snapshot, you can see that it literally just looks like the component that was rendered. You can see we have div testing at demo. We have the button over here. And the nice thing about snapshots, it allows you to detect if any UI changes have happened. So let's say, for example, if you accidentally change something in your UI, let's say, for example, if I change this text, and if I run the test again, it'll say that the snapshot is outdated, and it'll show you what the changes were. Okay, and that way you can double check and verify if you actually did intend to make these UI changes. So snapshot tests are definitely indeed very, very, very useful. And I would definitely say having it there would be great. I don't think snapshot tests are always necessary, especially if you have something that just constantly changes all the time, and you have to consistently if it inconsistently changes. So it's not necessarily all the time, but in this situation, I think this would be a good scenario for having a snapshot. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and start fresh with a new component, and hopefully what we did made sense. And like I said, if there's any questions, leave a comment down below. If you guys are in the chat, I know there's not many of you guys in the chat, but for those who are watching this VOD, leave a comment down below, and I'll try my best to get back to you in the comment section, or just Discord server. The Discord server is linked in the description. You can join, and you can feel free to ask questions about testing over here. And I'll be sure to put the code on my GitHub too. Okay, so let's go ahead and write a new component, and let's just go ahead and let's see. Let's get a little bit more complicated. Let's create a form component. Let's get a little bit complicated. So we're going to dive from testing a simple hard-coded text to testing state changes. This is going to be a good example. It's going to be a really good example. So let's go ahead and do export const form, and we likely won't need any props for this form. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and return form. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and put a label, HTML4. And the HTML4 attribute is pretty much going to take in the ID of the element that this label is associated with. So right now we don't have a, let me double check. Right now we don't have a an input. We don't have an input, but we're going to have one in just a second. So we're going to go ahead and let me actually just wrap this in a div. And let's put an input ID and let's just say username. Okay. And let's just go ahead and do username. Okay. And Abraham's got here, liked, left cause watching animes. Anime, nice. Yeah, no worries, Abraham's. I appreciate it. Thank you. Even if it means just stopping by and dropping a chat, I'd appreciate that a lot. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and render this form. Okay. And we are going to get a test fail because it's going to, actually, no, it won't. Actually, my bad. We weren't testing app. I thought I was going to fail because I thought we were testing app, but we were testing header, so it should be fine. Okay, so let's go over here and we can see that we have our input field right over there. Okay. Great. And let's go ahead and just have a, let's see, username. Okay, great. And let's go ahead and create a couple more. Let's do a username. Let's do a password, and then password. Okay, very, very simple form. Again, like I said, we're not focused on styling. We're just focusing on testing. Okay, hopefully you guys can actually see this form. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so now that we have a form, let's go ahead and bind let's bind some state variables to the value of this form. Let's bind input to this form. So we're going to go ahead and use the React use state hook. So const, we're going to go ahead and do const username set username. And this is just the return value of the React.use state hook. I'm going to go ahead and just import use state. And since we're using TypeScript, I like type annotating everything. So we're going to call useState, and we're going to leave the default value as an empty string. And we're going to do password, set password. useState, string. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to bind these state variables to the input. So as we are typing, typing stuff into these input fields, we're actually keeping track of the value of it. Okay. Excuse me, voice crack for a second. Whoops. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do value is going to be equal to username. Okay, and then we're going to do value over here is going to be password. And if I save, you're going to notice that's, if I type, nothing's going to work because we actually have to use the onChange event to handle that. So all I'm going to do with onChange is this function gives us the event, the HTML input element. Okay. This is the data type for the event. And all we're going to do is we're going to update the value of username by calling set username and passing e.target.value. So if you've dealt with forms before, this should be very familiar where you're referencing the event.target.value. You're referencing the event object, the target property on the event object, and then you're referencing the value of the target. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing with onChange down here. But instead of set username, we're going to call set password. And just to make this very simple so you guys can see the changes, let's go ahead and do Let's do h1, or let's do a p tag, username. Let's do password. Okay, so if I type A, you can see that it's being updated. Same thing with the password. There we go. Okay, great. So let's test our form. Let's make sure that it works. Actually, before we test, let's do one more thing. Let me go ahead and do in const. Let me go ahead and create a. We're gonna want to add a button. Okay, so we're gonna add that right over here. We're gonna say this is a submit button, and we're gonna go ahead and just do submit. How could I forget about the button? And we're gonna create a function called const on submit. Okay, and then we're gonna go ahead and for this form we're gonna say on submit. We're gonna pass in on submit. Okay, now right now if we were to click on this, you'll see that it'll actually refresh the page, or not necessarily refresh, but it'll actually like reload, and then actually yes, it does refresh, but it actually tries to push to a different route, and you can see that we have the not dollar sign, question mark sign up there, which is the start of the query string. So we don't necessarily want the page to refresh because we want to actually handle everything asynchronously. So we want to basically like fetch data from the API, and we might want to do something with it. So we actually want to call prevent default on the event. So let me go ahead and do this real quick. So, and let me get the data type of this event. I think the data type should just be React form event. Yeah, so if you're using TypeScript with React, quite often it's going to be a little bit annoying with like the typing. But you can always turn it off in the tsconfig, but I mean, I wouldn't really recommend it because, you know, like, I just think it's better to know, you know, make sure that you are asserting your types and annotating your types whenever you can. Okay, and you can always, like I said, you can always hover over. One thing that I like to do, if I don't, because like for example, if I just left it as E, it'll tell me that E implicitly has any type, and I don't necessarily want to just set it to an any because then I won't get IntelliSense. So one thing that I like to do is I like to pass in the function in here, and then hover over the parameter, and then look at the data type of it. So. And then I would just paste that here. So now I can do e.prevent default. Okay. And now, since we are binding the values since we're binding the values of the input fields to state variables, we can just get it from these state variables. We don't need to do things like e.target.value, or we don't need to, you know, search for certain things. So that's great. So now if I go over here, and let me go over to 1 second. Okay, so if I click on submit, you'll see that the question mark does not appear and it doesn't refresh the page. Okay, so that's great. So let's go ahead and console log username and password. Okay, and let's go ahead and open up the dev tools real quick. So let's just type 1. There we go. Perfect. So our OnSubmit is working just fine. Okay. So now quite often we might need to do something whenever we click on submit. We might need to call some API, right? We might need to use fetch and invoke some API, get some response, and then do something with that response. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create I personally like creating a utils file, and I like creating a file called api.ts, and this is where I like having all of my functions that have to do with calling APIs. So export async, let's do export const, let's do submit form, and we're gonna just use fetch. We're not gonna use Axios, and let's just go ahead. And let's see. I haven't used fetch for a while. I think fetch is the URL, and then method post. Have not used fetch for a while, so well, I gotta actually look up fetch API. It's been a while since I've used fetch because I use Axios mostly. It shouldn't be too hard to figure out. There should be an example. Okay, yeah, so it's the URL. And if we want to use post, we can pass in the method. And then if you want to pass in the body, we'd have to stringify it. So body, let's stringify JSON.data. So data, and then let's go ahead and create. I'm just gonna create a just simple types of TS. Export. I don't want to. I want to avoid using any export type. Form fields. Let's do form auth credentials. And let's do username string, password string. And we're going to annotate this as that. And then we're going to stringify, and then this should be URL. Okay, great. So, again, I'm not too concerned about the URL or whatever is being passed into fetch. Okay. What I'm concerned about is us calling this submit form. So, we're going to go ahead and inside this onSubmit function, we're going to go ahead and call submit form. And we need to pass in username and password, just like that. You could also store this object in a variable and pass in here, but you can just do it like that, just fine. Okay, now this returns a promise, so we always want to make sure we're resolving our promises. So you can do that by either by using a try catch with async await, or you can use .then.catch. I'm just going to use async await. So we're going to do const response equals await submit form catch error log error. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and console log. Actually, we're not going to console log anything. Response. Do we need to? Okay, that's fine. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and test our form component right now. But before we do that, let me explain what's going on with this onSubmit. And some of you guys might be tempted to actually call fetch inside onSubmit. And here's why I recommend not doing that from a testing, from a test-driven perspective. So essentially, what you want to do is you want to do your best to separate logic that can be separated into its own function. So the reason why you want to do that is because it makes it much easier to test your code. Because let's say, for example, with this onSubmit function, there's actually no way that we can actually test this onSubmit function and test what's going on. Sometimes we might want to make sure that certain things inside a function is being called. So, because what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that fetch is being called, and the way that I can verify that is by making sure that I have a wrapper function called submit form. We're going to pass in the data, and as long as I know that submit form is being called, then we should be fine, because we don't necessarily need to test fetch, because fetch is not our it's not our module that we need to worry about testing. We might need to mock it, but that's not really going to be an issue. Okay, so by encapsulating the logic into a different function, later on when we test, we can actually import that function, we can spawn that function, we can mock the implementation, we can mock the return value, and it makes it much easier to test. And I'll show you guys, and I'll show you guys that when we test the form component. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the form.spec.tsx. Oh, and also the one thing that I forgot to mention was that when you're writing tests, you want to make sure that it follows this pattern. .spec.tsx or .test.tsx. I think you can also do .ts as well. I mean .spec.ts or .test.ts. But I personally prefer .spec.tsx. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing that we did with the header. We're gonna import the form into here. So that'll be in components form, and we're gonna go and use a describe, and we're going to just say form. That's what we're doing, form. Okay. And hold on, I heard something. It sounded like someone was outside. Anyways, so describe form, and we're going to go ahead and write a test case for this. So let's just start off with a simple render. So it should render the form correctly. So ideally, I feel like if you just use a snapshot for your component, you don't really need to worry about writing tests to ensure that certain elements are in the DOM that should be there because it's hard coded, right? Unless if it's like asynchronous data, like if you're fetching from an API, then you should definitely test that. But if it's hard coded, I would say you shouldn't worry too much about manually searching for it, because like I said, hey Arian Garg, how's it going? I think I recognize your name actually. Welcome back to the stream. Because like I said before, you don't want to write like writing test cases isn't just about writing test cases. It isn't just about making sure you get your test passing. It's about writing meaningful tests, because if you write tests that pass but they make no sense, it's not going to help your application whatsoever. So you want to make sure you're writing tests that are meaningful, which means reducing situations where you don't necessarily need to test certain things that don't make sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to render our component. So const, let's do this. We're going to set up a structure. So const component is going to be React. Whoops. Let's type annotate this. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the before each hook. And this hook is basically going to run this callback function before each test. That's why it's called before each. There's different hooks such as before each, after each, before all, and after all. And they're pretty self-explanatory. It's part of Jest. Okay? And you've probably used it before. But what we're going to do is before each test, we're going to just render the component. And I had a certain way that I did this, but I just can't remember. Oh, I think we could just do this form. So basically what we're doing is before each test, we're going to render a component. So that way we don't have to worry about declaring it and then initializing it in every single, in the scope of every single test. Okay, so that makes it a lot easier for us. So now if I go ahead and do expect component to match snapshot, let's go ahead and what's going here? Oh, I think I messed this up. I think this component should be render results. Sorry about that. Okay. And yeah, I think that should be it. Okay. So let's look at the snapshot. And you can see that we have our form. Okay. Everything seems fine with the button. Okay, like I said, if you want to really make sure that the buttons are there, if you want to make sure that the texts are there, you can definitely go ahead and do that. It doesn't really hurt to add those extra tests. But I'm not going to do that. Let's move on. I'm going to move on to a more complicated test. So, again, like I said, we want to make sure that we understand what exactly it is that we want to test. And we want to make sure that we understand what the point of React testing library is, and and understand the philosophy behind it and what it aims to achieve. We don't just want to do things such as testing the state variables of username and password. We don't want to necessarily worry about that. You want to worry about testing things that the user can actually see. Okay, so for example, if the user doesn't necessarily need to see the username or password, you don't have to worry about making sure if the state of these components are being updated. You don't have to worry if they are changing or not, because that's not what the point of React testing library is. If you're using Enzyme, you could do that, but with React testing library, the whole point is to test things based on behavior, based on things that the user actually sees. And let me actually see if I can find React testing library. Let's see, the where they actually talk about that. So yeah, if you read over here, this library encourages your applications to be more accessible and allows you to get your tests closer to using your components the way a user will. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much what we're aiming to do. We don't necessarily need to care about testing the use state hook. We don't need to worry about testing use effect. React testing library doesn't. That's not the whole point of React testing library. Okay, and I want to emphasize that because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Okay, because a lot of people, because if you get the wrong idea, you might use the library incorrectly. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, we're gonna go ahead and think about what exactly we want to achieve. So I'm thinking about it. Okay, from a user perspective, I should be able to type in the username and password, and I should be able to click submit, and something should happen after I click submit. Either a error message pops up or a success message pops up. Something. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to type, we're going to simulate a couple events. We're going to type stuff into the input fields, and then we're going to go ahead and click on the, button, and then we're going to actually mock out the submit form response, so that way we can actually make sure our component is working based on certain scenarios. So before we do that, let me actually go ahead and do one more thing. Let me go ahead and create another state variable. And what I'm going to do is if set error. So what I'm going to do is if the response is successful, we're going to just set the error to an empty string. If the response failed, we're going to set the error to something went wrong. Okay? Okay. And in the DOM, we should probably display that error. So if I do submit, hold on. It should show up somewhere here. I'm not sure why. One sec. It is definitely calling the URL. Wait, let me check something real quick. Okay, so it's calling Nav the human. How's it going? How are you? Okay, I'm not sure why this error is not being rendered though. That is very strange. Wait, what is going on? Why? React is epic. Yeah, React is epic. Okay, so fetching. Wait, what's going on here? That's a little bit confusing. Good, how about you, if you want to call me that? Sure. I think, weren't you in the stream last time? Wait, hold on. Why is it... I don't understand. Wait, why is it throwing an error? Wait a minute, hold on. Why is it... I'm a little bit confused. So we're calling this function... and we're handling, we're catching the error here, so I'm a little bit confused why. I'm not really too sure why it's throwing an error. And it's not being caught down here. Yeah, I recognize the name. Wait, hold on, what is going on here? Hold on. Okay. I don't know what's going on with fetch because this is really weird and that should not be happening. But let's just do this. If let's just do this if data the username or there's no password, throw new error, invalid form fields. And then return. Whoops. I'm not sure what was going on with fetch. That is very, very weird. Okay. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I knew the error message. I knew what I was doing with the error was working right, but I'm not sure why fetch through error not being caught. That's so weird how it was not being caught. I don't know, was I doing something wrong? Because it failed to call the URL. So shouldn't that, if it fails to call the URL, I feel like that should just be caught down here, no? I don't know, that's weird. Anyways, it's not too important. It's not super important right now. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is this is gonna make testing a lot easier. So now that we know that if something went wrong, it's going to display an error here. And if something didn't go wrong, the error will not be there. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna write a test for that. So let's go ahead and do this. So we're gonna say it should display an error if missing fields. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. First, we already have the component rendered already because we have it rendered in this before each hook. Hey Anson, have you made a JS playlist or do you recommend any tutorials on JS? Looking to refresh my memory. Hey Newbot, so I actually did make a JS playlist, a JavaScript playlist, about over a year ago. I made it back in January of last year. You can still watch it because it mostly focuses on the fundamentals of programming while using JavaScript. It's not like it's outdated or anything like that. So you can definitely still watch it. I would recommend it. You can find it on a playlist on my channel. Let's see. And if you have any questions, you can ask me on Discord on my Discord server. So let's go back to this. So basically, should display an error if missing fields. So you also want to make sure you write your test. The names of your test, you want to make sure you're descriptive, not super descriptive, like you don't have to write a whole paragraph, but just write a short and simple message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, let's go ahead and make it so that we're going to make sure that we're passing in invalid fields, and we're going to make sure that we can see the error message. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we make sure that we can simulate that scenario where we pass in, let's say we don't pass in a username or password, okay? Again, like the same behavior that a user would see. How do we do that? Well, very simple. What we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and get the username. We need to get both inputs first. Okay, well actually in this situation we only need one or the other, so I'm just gonna get the username, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna get one of the inputs, we're gonna fire a typing event on that input, and then we're gonna click the button, and then we're going to check to see if the error is in the document. So const username, and we're gonna go ahead and reference the component, which is the render result, and we're gonna go ahead and get the input field. So to get the input field, you can actually do get by, I think one way to do it is you can do get by role, text box, and then name would be username. And let's just check our test should do the trick. It seems like a... hold on, there was a way that I did this. Get by text box. Wait, hold on 1 second. 1 second. Get by. Okay, yeah. So this is actually good. So we need to actually get the input field. So to get the input field, the way that we could do it is we can use get by label text. So what this does is it pretty much, you can search for it based on the label. Okay. So this ensures that this ensures that you have an actual label for your input. So we're gonna go ahead and get the label. Will be username. So username. So this will search in a DOM for a label with username, and then it will give us back the appropriate input field. Okay, and we should see in our test. It's just a snapshot failure. That's fine. Okay, there we go. We can see that the username was found. So let's just do expect username to be in the document, just for the sake of it. Just make sure it's there. Okay, great. So what we're gonna do is we're going to fire an event on this username. So we're gonna do let's do fire event. Actually, we can use the user event. So this is actually a it provides a bunch of different functions that we can use to simulate events that a user would possibly do. So let me see if I can find the documentation for that real quick, just for you guys. Use user events. This comes with React, create React app, but if you are using like Webpack, you would have to install it yourself. So this is the documentation, and you can see over here that it pretty much just simulates user events. Okay, so you can't use this for everything, but you can use it for pretty much most user events. So like, for example, input fields, or typing, sorry. So we can do user event, we can do type. So type will pretty much actually type the word one by one. If you want more control of the field, like if you want to just change the entire value, you wouldn't be able to use user event for that. Actually, you could. You could just you could. But it wouldn't do it one by one, if that makes sense. I'll explain the differences in just a sec. Don't worry about that. So we're gonna use the type event, and we need to pass in the element, the HTML element that we want to target. So that's gonna be username. Whoops. Can't spell today. And then we're gonna type in the string that we want to type. So let's just do let's see. I'm gonna go back. I'll be back soon. All right, Nav, take it easy. Let's just do React. So that's gonna be our username. Okay. And what we're gonna do now is we're going to need to get the button. So let's go ahead and get the button. And to get the button, we'll use get by role. And we will get the role by submit. There we go. Okay, and let's just make sure that to be in the document. You don't, like I said, you don't necessarily have to always write these assertions, but I'm just doing it just so you guys can see it, and you guys are familiar with these different assertions that you can use. Okay, so now that we've simulated an event, we're next going to go ahead and fire a button event, or we're going to fire a click event. So we're going to use user event.click, click on this button. Okay, now we likely will get a warning, I think. Yep, we're gonna get this warning. So if you see this act fire events update. So basically, the reason why this happens, the lost chip. How's it going? Welcome to the stream. I think this is my first time seeing you here. How's it going? Oh, nice to see that you're still here. Size 66p. So the reason why this warning will happen is because basically. You're performing a side effect, so you are updating state. So when we are, or you're updating state, and we're also trying to call a function. We're trying to call submit form, and it's happening asynchronously. So because we are not actually waiting for those events to finish, it's going to give us this error. Okay, so what we need to do to fix this is we need to use wait for. Okay, and this will literally wait for something to be done before it continues. So this returns a promise. So we're going to need to wrap this inside an async function, and that should get rid of the event, or not event. That should get rid of the warning, but we now have a different problem. Okay, yeah, it threw an error, invalid form fields. Great. Okay, that's good. So we can see that our test is actually working. You see how we have this warning, or not warning. You see how we have this invalid form fields? That's being console logged from line 17. Let me remove hello. That's being console logged from over here. So we know that our implementation is working. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and instead of worrying about this error message, because now we need to. So now the question that we have is, how do we actually make sure that it's actually erroring, like it's actually showing the error? Well, what we're going to do inside this wait for is we're going to make sure that the something went wrong text appeared on the screen. Okay, so we're going to go ahead inside this wait for. We're going to go ahead and say expect, and we're going to go and do component dot get by text something went wrong to be in the document. Okay, and let's see what happens with our test, and we can see that our test passed. Now let's just make sure. I think there's actually a plugin called, there's actually a just plugin that I need to download just to make sure. Okay, so if I actually negate this, if I say if it's not in the document, you can see that it throws an error. It fails the test. It says expect the document not to contain element, but it actually found it. So we know that the error is appearing. So hopefully you guys are starting to understand the power of this React testing library, this tool, and what we can actually do with it. So let's just go through a quick recap of what actually just happened. So basically what we were trying to do is we're trying to test our form. We want to make sure that when we actually type in an empty field for any one of these, username or password, it'll actually display the error message. So it tells the user that something went wrong, and then they have to fix their inputs. And if they enter in a value for both fields and they click submit, the error disappears. And we want to make sure we can write a test case for that. So how do we do that? Well, we went into our form.spec.tsx, and what we did, well, the first thing that we did was we searched for the username input field. And to get the error to appear, we just need to make sure that we are clicking the submit button without any input fields. Actually, you actually don't even need this username. I just realized you actually don't even need to have the username, because if you just actually have the button and if you just click on it, it'll appear, the error will appear. And think about it, like if a user just does that, that's what they'll see. So this is pretty much like how we're testing behavioral. We're testing the behavior of our components. Okay, so and we can also write another test case too. So we can leave this test case alone, but we can also, if missing password field. So we can, again, you want to write test cases for every scenario. So this scenario is when the user only has the username but no password. Okay, we're going to copy and paste this test, and we're just going to change it. So instead of username now, we're going to make it so that if they don't have the password, we're making sure that it fails if they don't pass the password. If they don't pass if they're missing the username, then it will fail as well. So we literally just change up a couple things, and you'll see that our test is going to pass. So it should display an error if missing password field. It does, because we got the username, we typed in something for the username, and then we also got the button. We clicked on the button, and then we waited for the error to appear in the document. And this happens asynchronously, so you need to use the wait for. And we're doing the same thing down here, but instead of displaying the error if the password is not there, we're displaying the error if the username is not there. Junie boy, how's it going? So now we're gonna do one, and the last scenario for this form is we need to check to see if the error is there when none of them is there, when none of the fields are present. So for that, if missing both fields. So for that, we won't necessarily need the password. We won't need the password field. All we need to do is just get the button, click on it, and then just see that the error message is appearing in the DOM, which it is. Expect component get by text to be in the document. Perfect. So we just covered 3 situations where the error message will be displayed. Okay. So now let's write a more complicated test. What I want to do is I want it to display an error first, and then I want the error message to be gone once the user corrects their form fields. And that can easily be done if we type in, a username, okay, and then we click submit, the error message pops up. But if we fill in something for password, it disappears. So let's write a test case for that. So let's go ahead and let's use it, and let's just say it should display an error when missing fields, and then it should display an error when missing fields, then disappear when fields are present. Okay, there we go. Again, like I said, you don't have to write a whole essay for your test names, but you definitely want to be as descriptive as possible. So when you actually look at the test cases, it gives you a more better understanding of what your application does. So one good way to actually skim through code and understand the code base is by looking at the test cases. If you look at the test cases, you look at the names of the test cases. It gives you a better idea of what is supposed to go on, like what features are supposed to happen, what's supposed to happen. So it gives you a better understanding of the application as a whole. So you definitely want to make sure you're writing, detailed but short test cases. It's kind of like similar to like writing a git commit message. So yes, so let's go ahead and simulate this. So it should display an error when missing fields. So for this situation, we can go ahead. We're gonna need both the password and username field. So let's just go ahead and grab that. We'll also need the button as well. So let's go ahead and we're gonna use get by label text for finding the input fields. And the reason why get by label text will work for us is because we actually have a label for input. Okay, there are other ways you can get input fields. You can use roles, but we're gonna use label text. And to get the button, we're gonna do get by role. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and, let's just fire an event for button. So user event .click button, and then we're going to need to wait for the error to appear in the document. What's my time zone? I'm in the mountain time zone. MST. Yeah, MST. Right now it's 12:05 for me right now, 12:05 a.m. Well, what time is it for you? So let's see, user event.click. Okay, so we're gonna click on the button, and you'll notice that if we actually try to assert this error message to be in the document, we're actually gonna get an error. Okay, and it's gonna say that it's unable to find it. And like I said, the reason why it's happening is because we're performing side effects. Okay, we're performing a side effect, and whenever we perform side effects, they can happen asynchronously. So we need to make sure we are waiting for it to finish before we can do our assertion. Okay, so let's go ahead and use a wait for, and we're going to wait for this to be in the document. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, there we go. Let me actually remove this fetching because we don't need that. That fetching console log. Okay, there we go. So yeah, there we go. So we can see that we clicked on the button. We clicked on the button. It has the error message in the document. Okay, great. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to input for username and password. We're gonna fill in the fields and we're gonna click the submit button again, and then we're going to see if the error message has been removed from the document, which it should. Oh, you're in PST. Nice. I'm actually in. I'm in Arizona actually. Which what state are you from, if you don't mind me asking? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and use the user events. We're gonna do user event.type. For the username field, we're gonna go ahead and just type. Let's just type John, and then for user events, we're gonna do type password, and we'll do John as well. And then now we're gonna go ahead and click on the button. So again, it's literally like what a user would actually do. Type, and then click on a button. And now what we're gonna do is we wanna wait for, basically when we click on this button, what it should do is it should remove the error from the document. We know that, okay? But we need to run a test to make sure that we know that it's being removed from the document. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a function called wait for element to be removed. And this is part of React testing library. So we're gonna wait for the something went wrong element to be removed. And to wait for that, we're gonna simply do component. And this is gonna be a little bit tricky. So let's try get by text and let's see what happens. I think this might actually fail. We might need to use query by text. Actually, no. Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, so we can actually use get by text. We can wait for it to be removed. So now we want to assert. We want to write an assertion to make sure that this text was actually removed from the document. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use get by text, and you're going to see that we're actually going to get an error. It's going to say that it's already been, you need to wait for it to be removed or something. Yep, let's see. Yeah, it said it's already been removed. Okay, so since it already been removed already, what we need to do is we actually need to use query by text instead. Okay. Yep. So query by text. So the thing with query, the difference between query and query and get, I think with query is that it'll actually search even if it doesn't exist. It'll still see if it can find it. So it makes it easy for you to test to see if things don't exist in the document. Let me actually just double check the query again. I just want to be very certain with you know what I'm telling you guys. Queries. So there's query by, there's get by. Yeah, so it literally says right here, this is useful for asserting an element that is not present. California, nice, man. I slept the whole day. My sleep is screwed up. Yeah, I actually, my sleep is kind of weird too. I usually like sleeping at like 7 or 8 p.m. and waking up at 3 or 4 a.m. And I actually went to sleep. I actually went to sleep at 7 a.m. Or no, I went to bed at like 6:30, I think. And I was actually going to bed with the intention to actually fall asleep and not just nap or lay around. And I woke up, I don't remember what time I woke up. I woke up, I think I woke up at like 8 o'clock, I think, or 8:30. It was around 8 or 9. And I just couldn't fall back asleep. So I'll probably go to sleep in like maybe 30 minutes and wake up at 3. But I really just want to get my schedule going. It's just that my body's not really used to it. It usually takes about like a week or two for my body to fully get used to a certain sleep schedule. But I just feel like the 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. schedule works best for me because I generally enjoy being up very early when the sun hasn't even risen yet, and it's just dark. It's still dark outside. It feels really nice. But yeah, it's it's technically the same time for us, but we're not in the same time zone because I'm in Arizona, and we're in Mountain Time. Okay. So yeah, query by text is good for searching for things that are not present. So that's why we want to use it. So now it's failing because it's actually not in the document, which is correct. This error message should not be in the document. So we're going to use not to be in the document. And we're going to see that our test is going to pass. There we go. Perfect. So we have covered a decent amount. I think we covered every single scenario. We covered, well, so far we've covered every single scenario. We've covered the situation where they enter in nothing at all and they click submit and it'll display an error. We've covered a situation where if they enter in just the password or the username, it'll display the error. And we covered a scenario where if they don't enter anything, they click the button, it displays the error, and then when they enter it again, when they enter something for both fields, it will remove the error message. And you can see our test cases are passing. So hopefully you guys see how useful this is. Now, if I haven't convinced you guys on why you should test your code, put it this way, right? Put it this way. Right now, what we did was we wrote test cases for our code. We basically made it so that every single time we were to make a change, it'll run these test cases automatically for us, and it'll make sure that the behavior, the functionality is working as it should after code changes. Remember what I said earlier in the live stream in the beginning? I said that when it comes to writing test cases, it allows us to make sure that any additional change that we are making to our code is not breaking existing code. Because if it does, you're going to have a problem. And usually, if you don't write test cases, you might end up with new changes that affect previous changes, and you might not see it from a surface level perspective, but you might run into bugs. It might expose vulnerabilities. And this is why you want to make sure you write test cases. You want to know what's going on every single time you write new code in your code base. Okay? And this is a perfect example. We wrote a test case that makes sure that it does what the functionality needs to do for the error message. If the error message is in the document, it's going to be removed when the user clicks on the submit button if they submit valid fields. If the user clicks on the submit button but there are no valid fields, then it will display the error message. So that itself gives me confidence that this form is working appropriately. And what I can do is I can even build on top of this form. I can actually write even more new features. I can do additional things. And I can run the test and make sure that it works. And if something breaks, then that means that I may have messed up on something that is affecting my current code changes, or we may have just written a bad test. So I hope that this, how long have we been streaming for this? It's been like about an hour and a half that we've been talking. I had my mic muted earlier. I was an epic fail. But I hope this 90-minute presentation, this live stream of React testing library, this whole concept of testing in general, I really hope that this actually gives you guys some good insight on testing. The whole point of this live stream was for me to introduce testing to people who aren't familiar with it, and also just kind of like better understand myself, because like I said, I'm still new to this. There's a lot of things that I'm still learning, and I feel like the best way for me to learn more and kind of like just it's kind of like studying. I'm kind of like learning new things, and I'm brushing up on these skills as I am introducing it to you guys. So it's kind of like we're learning together as a whole, and I think that is very great because we can always go back to this video and rewatch it and reference it. So that's great. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably end it here. I'm going to go ahead and put this code on my GitHub. So if anyone needs a reference for this, they can. But I'll probably just like leave it for myself though, because I'll probably need to reference this someday. So let me go ahead and just create this repository. And let me go ahead and get remote origin. Let's go ahead and do that. Get oh, it's get remote add origin. Okay, and let's do get add, get commits, test cases. Okay, and I think let's do get push, set upstream, origin, and then the branch name. So that should be pushed to the repository. Okay. Damn, I should have modified the README a little bit. So here's the code. Source tests. We have our tests, our beautiful, beautiful tests. And honestly, testing might be annoying for a lot of people. I know testing was actually the hardest thing for me. And it was the most annoying thing for me because I didn't really quite understand how to go about it. And when I tried looking for resources on YouTube, I wasn't really fully satisfied because there was still a lot of answers that I wanted to ask. I'm sorry, a lot of questions that I had left, that were left unanswered, even after watching those videos. And I feel like testing itself is definitely, again, it's a very important skill to have. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I generally hated testing before. I've always had a problem with testing, but I needed to actually get better at it because we have to make sure, like for my full-time job as a software engineer, we have to make sure we're writing test cases for our code, and we're making sure that we're writing meaningful tests. We're writing tests that have full coverage, and I feel like if you want to build your own full stack application and you want to serve it to users, you probably should definitely write tests because it makes your code a lot more maintainable. Like I'm working on a side project right now and I'm actually working on the test cases, and I'm actually trying to make sure that I'm covering every single scenario as much as possible, because if you don't write your test cases and if you have an application that just breaks for the users they're just going to abandon your application. So it's very crucial, especially if it's a really large application. So there's a lot of reasons why I could probably give you 100 different reasons why on why you should test your code, but this is just a couple that I can give you guys. So anyways, I think this is going to be it for the live stream. I wanted to make this a fairly short live stream, but yeah, I have the code already in the repository. I'll leave it in the description, so that's going to be easy to reference. But that is going to be it. I'll actually leave all of the I'll actually leave everything in the description. I'll leave the links, everything in the description, so that way you guys can look for it. Anyways, so I definitely appreciate those who stopped by and hung out with me. Again, not a lot of people here, but that's fine. I don't really mind. I appreciate all types of company from you guys, and I appreciate you guys for staying and watching. So hopefully in the next stream, maybe we can get some more people in here so we can have it more interactive. I do understand that it is a little bit later for a lot of people because I am in West Coast now, and people on the East Coast are probably sleeping. People in the UK are probably still sleeping too. But you know what? That's fine. Hopefully next time I can stream at a better time and we can get more people here. Anyways, so I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you guys for joining the stream. If you guys want to chat with me, feel free to join the Discord server. The link is in the description. And I'll see you guys in my next stream.